Hello, everyone. So today I would like to present my study titled as Risk and Protective Factors of Suicide Ideation and Attempts Among Justice-Involved Black Girls, a Latent Profile Analysis. So here I'll first share my slides with you by sharing the screen. So as we all know that when it comes down to the causes of death, we see that suicide actually claimed way more fatalities than any other major disease, such as cancer, cardiovascular disease, or HIV/AIDS. This is the data from the World Health Organization. And we also know that the risk of suicide is not evenly distributed across different social groups. So this is the CDC data. It's the data collecting nationally representative data for the youth in the general population. We can see that for the youth in the general population, lifetime suicide ideation rate is 24%, and lifetime suicide attempt is 11%. This is in huge contrast with the lifetime suicide ideation rate, which is 52, nearly 52%. And the lifetime suicide attempt is nearly 24%. We can tell the rates are pretty much 2 times the rate of the youth in the population. Now, what is this population? This is the population of girls in the juvenile justice correctional facilities. And because they are in the juvenile justice facilities, so typically the data collection in schools are not really representative of this really, really hard to reach social group. In other words, the data in the national representative numbers collected from schools across the country tells us barely nothing about what is happening among the population of justice-involved Black girls. So this study really fills the literature gap by zooming to this particular hard-to-reach population and look into their risk of suicide ideation and attempts, and also examine what are the precipitators of their suicide thoughts and behavior. So the theoretical framework that drove this study is the interpersonal psychological theory of suicide, and developed by Dr. Joyner. And in his framework, he identified thwarted belongingness, perceived burdensomeness, and capacity for suicide are 3 main contributors to suicide thoughts and behaviors. Thwarted belongingness refers to the individual do not really feel belonging to any social circle, social isolation, disconnectedness. This is really a main social cultural contributor of suicide thoughts and behaviors. Perceived burdensomeness refers to a life state that the individual realized that there is so little risk to succeed, and the individual basically gradually realized that educational, career, or in other domains of life, the individual, instead of really contributing to the family, to the community, or to society at large, the individual actually would become a burden to others, especially to their important others, such as family members and community members. So this is another contributing factor to suicide thoughts and behavior. The third factor is capacity for suicide. Typically, we see that individuals who suffer long-term abuse would develop tolerance to pain. So that build up the capacity to suicide because the individual, when to some level insensitive to pain, that means the individual would also have a level of insensitivity to losing life. And also individuals who are uh, from the battlefield have really close access to weapons. They are also have high capacity for suicide because of the access to lethal weapons. So this is the three key concept in the theory to explain suicide. However, those are pretty abstract concept. So in empirical studies, those concepts are represented by a lot of observational measures, and those observational measures are examined to see how they contribute to suicide thoughts and behaviors. And previously, there are a large body of empirical studies found support for the interpersonal psychological theory of suicide. Feelings of thwarted belongingness and perceived burdenness have received a large body of support, and the capacity component of the theory also received empirical support. When people develop a sense of fearlessness about death, about hurt, about pain, they were more likely to engage in suicide attempts. However, we noticed that majority of the previous studies actually are based on samples from the general population. And for the youth, they are in the correctional facilities that are not in school, not in their family, not in their community. We know so little about their suicide predictors, their suicide risk, their suicide prevalence. And another gap in the literature is really lies in the assumption that the predictor works the same for everybody. Because a lot of time a regression model would be used to assess the different contributors of suicide. However, running one model, it means that researchers generally assume the predictors work the same way for each and every group in the sample. This is really concerning because due to the high level of heterogeneity we observe in adolescence. Adolescence is really a dynamic developmental stage in life, and especially among at-risk youth. Their adolescence, they have very drastic, different past life experiences. Some are troubled by abuse, trauma, while others might troubled by disruption of family structure or dysfunctional family structures due to their very, very divergent experiences. We should really test whether there are heterogeneous groups regarding the risk factors of suicide, and then whether the different groups would demonstrate divergent risk of suicide. So to address the two main research questions, I leveraged data across about 10 years, um, focus on the Black girls in correctional facilities with a sample more than 1,500. The outcome variable I focus on are lifetime suicide attempt ideation as well as current suicide attempt and ideation. It means they experience current ideation while in the facility and they displayed attempt while in the facility. And the independent variable, as we discussed, the theoretical framework of belongingness, burdensomeness, and capacity are the main three key concepts that help us understand suicide thoughts and behavior. So under belongingness, we have the measure of weak relationship with family and with educators, meaning that a sense of disconnectedness is fostered. And burdensomeness as a concept is represented as dissatisfaction with schools, education goal misalignment, and family demands. Um, Specifically, they tapped into whether the Black girl in the correctional facility reported school is not helpful. They don't see themselves succeed in school. They don't see themselves achieve education achievement. And also, they are under heavy family demands because either parents or siblings suffer disability issues, suffer unemployment issues, suffer drug addiction issues. For all of those, they are measured under the family demands. Now, acquired capacity, as we discussed, is really a level of fearlessness to pain, to loss of life. So we have two measures, which is chronic physical abuse and exposure to violence experienced by the girls. And we also have um, covariates, as depression is such a strong contributor to suicide ideation and thoughts. So depressive and anxiety scale is measured by Massachusetts youth screening instrument. We call that MACY-2. Substance use is also a covariate. It's a scale measured under MACY-2 as well. So as we mentioned, we want to see whether there's a heterogeneity in their level of belongingness, burdensomeness, and acquired capacity. So with the sample size more than 1,500, I run the latent profile analysis using the R package. It's a machine learning method that enables researchers to find the groups that are very similar within, but the different groups show really large heterogeneity. So how many groups will be determined? That's really determined by the model fit indices, BIC and AIC. So after the iterative process based on the R latent profile, the algorithm, six groups emerged as the best solution. And we can tell for group six, represented by this orange color, typically the level of all those weak relationship with family, substance misuse, or exposure to violence or physical abuse, this group has pretty low level because the higher level means the more severe levels. So group six is pretty low on all the indicators. And which group is concerning, as we tell, group one is concerning because the relationship with educators or family, we see that there's a group that is represented, group five. They have low levels of relationship with the family and educators. However, group five did pretty average on other indicators. And then let's look at into group 3, which is a green group. That group has high level of substance misuse and depression anxiety scale. That group also is unsatisfied with school. That is a concerning group emerged. Then let's also look into this group. It's a darker blue. It's group 1, exposed to violence and physical abuse. That too indicator is very high for this group 1. And then for this purple group, this group has high family demands. But when it comes down to abuse, we see that this is not really high for the purple group. So now the interesting question is, we see some group pretty low on almost everything, such as group 6. And then we see other group have concerning levels on some indicators. Will this difference actually explain their difference in suicide ideation and attempts? So I used the group membership to run a regression. Here are the findings. Group 6, the best group we found, was used as the reference group. So all the other groups are compared with group 6. And the results indicated it is very obviously group 1, that is a group with high levels of physical abuse and exposure to violence. This group does really have higher risk of lifetime suicide ideation, current ideation, lifetime suicide attempt when compared to group 6. So because with the odds ratio is bigger than 1 and its significance. And then let's look into group 3 compared to group 6. Group 3 is the green one. It's basically drug use and mental health is really the most concerning. So it turns out compared to the best group, that is group 6, low on almost everything, this group suffering mental health struggles also showed significantly higher risk of lifetime ideation, current ideation, and lifetime attempt. So very obvious. And then that's really based on control of history of drug use, mental health problem, age. And then when we look at the current suicide attempt, we didn't really see a whole lot of a significant difference emerged. However, because this current suicide attempt is extremely low prevalence, because when used in their correctional facilities, they don't even have any access to weapon. So in the correctional setting, it's very hard to actually attempt suicide. So with extremely low rate in this outcome, I used the force logistic model that is designed to analyze the extremely rare event, but still the power might really not be high to discover any difference due to the extremely low rate of suicide attempt in correctional facilities. But overall, in other models, we observed that compared to the best group, the group with abuse histories and the group of its mental health struggles, they do have really higher rate of suicide ideation as well as attempts. So it shows that first, there is heterogeneity in the profiles. Even among this at-risk social group of girls, we do have heterogeneity. Some groups fared better than others. And also, it seems the theoretical framework of the interpersonal psychological theory of suicide has applicability to this group because the latent profiles are completely based on the theoretical concept. And then when we use the profile to predict their suicide ideation attempt outcome, the latent profiles are significant predictors. And it also shows that given the heterogeneity regarding the profiles of justice involved Black girls, we see actually culturally sensitive assessment and prevention programs as very imperative to be implemented to decrease their risk of suicide ideation and behavior, because it's not really easy as one size fits all. Some programs might really work for Black girls suffering trauma and abuse. And we also found there are groups of Black girls without severe trauma or without severe abuse. So their needs might rely into mental health. Their needs might lie into their dissatisfaction with the educators, their dissatisfaction with school. So that needs really more tailored programs to really help them to address their struggles. So the heterogeneity actually highlighted the need for tailored programs rather than the one size fits all. And thank you for listening to my presentation. This project is funded by the National Institute of Mental Health. And I am now happy to answer your questions. Thank you.